Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad we're having this hearing. And thank you to all of the witnesses. Thank you for being here. I want to visit with you in just a second, but I just want to reiterate something that I heard the chairman say that I agree with, which is that there really ought to be government witnesses sitting there. And I tell you what I'm tired of. I've had Secretary Mayorkas sit in front of me in a different committee, the Homeland Security Committee, where I asked him at length about the outrage of 250,000 migrant children, unaccompanied, crossing the border in the last 2 years, and tens of thousands of them being sold into slavery. Let's not mince words. They've been sold into slavery. When kids are being put into factories, forced to work overnight, forced to work in terrible conditions, they're not getting paid, they're not going to school, sometimes they're not getting fed, that's slavery. And what I heard from Secretary Mayorkas, don't take my word for it, you go look at the record, read the transcript. What he told me was, oh, it's not my problem. We don't have anything to do with it. Not my problem. Now we have a new report from HHS where they say it's not their problem. Amazing how this works. Nobody's responsible. These kids are literally being sold as slaves in the United States of America in the year 2023, and nobody's responsible. They don't want to come and testify to this committee. You bet they don't. They don't want to be put under oath. They don't want to answer any questions. They don't want cameras here. They don't want to take any responsibility. Well, I tell you, it's somebody's fault. It's not the kid's fault. Thank God for the New York Times, phrase I never thought would come out of my mouth. But really, I mean, thank the Lord that the New York Times did these series of reports, because otherwise we'd still be fed the lies from this administration that everything is fine and dandy. We know just where the kids are. It's all great. They're all fine. No, it's not. Is it fine that people like Carolina Yuck, who's 15 years old, I apologize to her if I mispronounced her name, she's one of the folks, one of the young women that the New York Times caught up with. What is she doing? Midnight in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a conveyor belt carrying bags of Cheerios past a cluster of young workers. Carolina, every 10 seconds, has to stuff a sealed plastic bag of cereal into a passing yellow carton. It's dangerous work, fast-moving pulleys and gears that had torn off fingers and ripped open a woman's scalp. The factory was full of underage workers like Carolina who'd crossed the southern border by themselves, vulnerable, now spending late nights bent over hazardous machinery in violation of child labor laws. Carolina says, sometimes I get tired and feel sick. Her stomach often hurt. She was unsure if that was because of the lack of sleep, the stress from the incessant roar of the machines, or the worries she had for herself and her family in Guatemala. This is totally, utterly, completely unacceptable. And I am sick unto death of this administration coming before this Congress and saying, it's not our fault, we have nothing to do with it, we don't know where they are, the kids are fine, somebody will do it, somebody will get around to it. Ridiculous. Well, let's look at some of the things that we've learned about what's going on over at HHS that Secretary Becerra is doing. Here's some quotes from employees at HHS. At least 5 Health and Human Services staff members said that they were pushed out after raising concerns about child safety. This is all from the New York Times, by the way. Mr. Becerra told the Office of Refugee Resettlement Director that if she could not increase the number of discharges of children, he'd find somebody who would. Next, 20% of kids have to be released every week or you get dinged. It's a conveyor belt of children being forced through the system. And what's the priority of HHS? Just get them out as fast as we can. They go to factories. They go to slave labor. I've written to the FBI and asked the FBI, where are the 80,000 plus children this administration's lost? They don't know. I've said it's your responsibility to go get them. It's a direct violation of child labor laws. They're not doing anything. Nobody's doing anything. It's outrageous. It's absolutely outrageous. And the fact that the administration won't come and sit there and answer questions to this committee is absurd. And it is nothing more than cowardice. They don't want to answer questions. They don't want to be responsible. They don't want to take responsibility for this. So let the record reflect that this administration has let tens of thousands of children be sold into slavery, and they are doing nothing about it. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, I'm glad you said that we would be holding additional hearings. We need to have additional hearings. There need to be administration witnesses there, and we need to figure out what in the world is going on. and who's to be held accountable for this. Because I tell you what's not an acceptable answer. It's not acceptable to say, it's not my problem. We wish the kids the best. The kids are in danger. The kids are in slavery. The kids are being exploited. And it should not happen in the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing, and I, too, am glad that we're going to have others, because I'm hoping that we'll have bipartisan support not only for enforcement of prohibitions against exploiting child labor, but also perhaps for comprehensive immigration reform. As Senator Tillis said, we need to confront the broken system that currently is our immigration legal apparatus. Not only stronger border security, a faster, more reliable asylum process, visas for people who will have jobs that are vitally needed here, and a path to citizenship for our dreamers, but also enforcement of labor law violations now on the books. And I want to ask you, Ms. Gerstein, thank you for your very extensive report in your testimony. What kind of grade would you give federal law enforcement of our child labor prohibitions under OSHA?
Well, the child labor prohibitions are located within the Fair Labor Standards Act, and the Wage and Hour Division has responsibility for enforcing them, but obviously OSHA enforces workplace safety and health. I think they're doing a very good job given the extremely limited resources that they have been provided. Our federal labor agencies have been starved for funding for decades. They have not been supported in a way that is necessary to help them do their jobs. In the meantime, the economy has grown tremendously. We also have the rise, for example, of forced arbitration that prevents people from being able to bring cases in court and adds greater pressure to public agencies. The decline of union density. Unions help make people more able to report violations because there's less fear of retaliation. And so with all of this added pressure, the growth of the economy, the labor agencies are just really, really underfunded. Under the current acting labor secretary, Julie Su, and there are so many civil servants and people within the labor department who are really doing the best that they can and being strategic. The PSSI case was really, really well investigated and well done, but they're not given the tools and the resources they need to do their job effectively.
To put it very simply, our enforcement mechanisms are being starved.
Absolutely.
And they were under the previous administration. In fact, the number of OSHA inspectors under President Trump fell to the lowest number in 45 years, correct?
Yes, and the Wage and Hour Division, for example, had 400 more inspectors in the late 70s than we have now. And one expert did some calculations and found that if you look at the number of investigators to workplaces, that Wage and Hour at its inception in the 1930s had 64 times as many investigators per workplace as it does now.
And having been a prosecutor, I think we have a number of prosecutors on the committee. Deterrence depends on enforcement. Respect for the law depends on reliable and effective apprehension and prosecution. It also depends on penalties. Right now, the maximum penalty, I think, is $15,000 for violating the child labor laws. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a little over 15,000.
And would you agree that increasing the penalties would also have a strong effect in deterring these kinds of violations and protecting children?
I think it's critical that we increase the penalties. I think that alone will be inadequate unless funding is also increased and unless we find a way to hold lead corporations responsible and accountable.
So I invite my Republican colleagues who speak vociferously and vehemently on this topic to join the Child Labor Prevention Act, which would increase the maximum fines for violations and establish new criminal penalties. Now we're talking criminal penalties for child labor and hold employers accountable. There's also the Child Labor Exploitation and Accountability Act, which is sponsored by our colleague, Senator Booker. I am a co-sponsor of these measures, but unless we take these kinds of practical steps, resources, penalties, more effective enforcement, we can make all the speeches we want. We can use all the rhetoric we please, but it won't have an effect on employers who exploit children, because for them, it's all about the money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Lạnh buồn ơi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, bao nhớ nhung xa vời, ôi nói không nên lời để cạn niềm yêu mến anh. Phút gần gũi này thôi, tay không rời, mắt ngắm xa chân trời, mà lòng nghe nhớ thương hoài. Anh ơi, chớ quên ngày mai đã có em chờ anh, chung xây đẹp ý đời. Tương lai ấp trên môi, yêu nhau ta thầm nói, nụ cười trao duyên mới, ước vọng để mà vui. Khuya nay anh đi rồi, đem chí trai xây đời, đem mến thương cho người người đợi chờ anh. Gần gũi này thôi, khuya nay anh đi rồi, tay nắm tay không rời, mắt ngắm xa chân trời, mà lòng nghe